All right, greetings internet. So today we're going to start on the kick drum for the song Superficialstition by the band 86. Let's get started. We're going to break this up a little bit differently than we've been. We're actually going to go through plugins. I'll show you what I did, then we'll sort of replicate it from scratch, and we're going to do it plugin by plugin rather than what we've been doing, and we're going to see how this works for us. I'm also going to try and break this up into smaller digestible portions at some point because I did a test run on this and it took me like a half hour to get through it. Anyway, let's show you where we get started. I'll show you the whole drum set, and then we'll move on to the kick. So here's the drum set as it started. This is completely raw as we recorded it. And onto the kick. So you notice right off the bat, you hear the kick drum. It's instead of like a kick snare, kick snare, or whatever. You hear the kick actually doing ghost notes, like he's tapping the drum head with the kick pedal like accidentally. And a lot of this mix is sort of working on mitigating that. One of the things that happened on this album is the band did not want to track to a click. So doing a lot of cutting, pasting drums to find good hits would have taken forever. Which great opportunity for us because it shows us sort of the best way to work on these situations. So one of which, obviously, I ended up using a gate on the drums. That happened in the American Class A here. And actually, it was such a pain that I ended up sidechaining some of the snare out of the kick drum just to make that threshold on that gate a little bit smoother. But anyway, here's where we started on the kick. Here's where we ended up. Little boom track in there. Boom's a little loud. All right, and I'm going to go through all the elements to that, and we will start with this F6 right up top. So the F6 here is being done solely for the purpose of getting rid of some of that snare hit. So you see up here, I got the side chain channel going on, and that is the side chain of the snare top right down here. I'll show you we'll create that here in a second, but let me just show you what happened here. So here's the kick. All right, here's the kick with that bypassed. You hear that snare, it sounds, well, pretty present. I know it doesn't seem like it's doing much, but it's actually pulling down some of that kick. And with that there, it's this little exterior side chain. I will actually show you how to do that just now. So let's just start a brand new F6 RTA, and we'll go down here. So this snare, let's clear that out. In Pro Tools, on your sends, just create a new output bus. We'll call this bus 1. Do it pre-fader. That way anything I do in the mix, it's not going to be affecting my side chain. I'm going to rename it to snare SC, or snare side chain. All right. All right, in this little key section, in the bus, we're going to go to this new snare side chain. I'm going to hit play. We're going to use the first, third. Actually, I'm going to use the fifth band as well. We'll do it a little differently than I did it. But first off, we're going to start on the second band. And you'll actually see when I hit play, you see this little spike around 180 hertz. Now, some research done earlier, if we scroll down to this snare top channel, I have marked down here 175. That's roughly where that fundamental on that snare hits. So we're going to move this over to 175. This is me attacking the fundamental of that snare drum. And we're going to solo this band. Now, if you want a lot of fun, we're obviously at the moment where I'm not quite moving over the sidechain here. I'm not listening to the sidechain. This is just the signal from the kick. If I switch over to this exterior, that now switches over to the sidechain. So I'm actually listening to the fundamental of that snare. And yep, sounds like what I want to pull. So what I'm going to do is take this attack here. Let me drop it down to 3. All right. Slow down that release so that way it brings back up. We're actually going to be more drastic than I was during where I ended up because this gives me a chance to, rethink my every position I made during the mix because, you know, mixers, we love doing that. I'm going to hit play again. Bring this threshold down. You hear how that snare signal, obviously, we're listening to try and cut out that snare. You hear it's sounding a little weaker. And I don't want it actually cutting out when the kick is going. So it's barely wiggling when the kick's hitting. All right, next up I'm going to do a higher frequency. You see a spike around 1500. We're going to go over here and solo this band. Now I switch to the exterior again, so I'm soloing that side chain. Turn that off. Do the same thing here. Turn this down to about 3. Bring this release up to 200 milliseconds. Take that down to minus 12. And start. You see it's only really hitting when that snare is going off. And I'm also, well, one thing I didn't do when I first did this, actually add a third band. So we're actually going to do that now. See a spike around 4.2K. It's about 5K actually. We'll wind this out a bit. Do the same thing. Actually, we'll speed that up even more. Higher frequencies move faster. The difference between 3 milliseconds, 1 millisecond, probably not going to do much for what we're doing, but might as well play with it a bit. Nope, that's too slow or too fast. All right, we're going to do the same thing. All right, you see how it's basically just moving when that snare's hitting? So let's take a listen of where we started at. In the end, it's only a few dB cut. Now, all I'm really doing is trying to clear some way for this gate. So hope that helps, and we'll move on to the American Class A for the gate. Now, on the gate, so typically I'll do an EQ before I hit compression. I actually didn't do any compression on this kick drum. I sort of let the drummer do his own thing, and I supplemented sort of the varying dynamics in the drummer. He did a pretty good job. He wasn't a session drummer, but he did fine. And actually bringing a sample later, sort of just work on that consistency instead of playing with compression on this mix. As American Class A, there's a few different things going on here. I am adding some drive. I'm sort of doing a little bit of EQ before I hit my main EQ, and then I'm doing most of the work here is actually happening in this little transient design section on this American Class A, and that is finagling with the gate and really playing with your punch and your sustain. So here is where we started. Here's where we ended up. And this is basically just to sort of just isolate the kick, so I'm not having to go through and just like cut up the file so much. And let me show you, where to go from there. So I'm going to just turn off this shape and this equalizer section and turn this back to 0 so you can just hear with the drive turned off and on. So here's off, obviously. Now you don't hear it a whole lot yet. It's a little subtle difference. Let me actually show you starting from 0. So here's no drive. Hear what it's doing to the low end, sort of thickening it up a little bit. Now if I turn up to about 6, you'll really hear it. Now I ended up keeping it about 4. You can get pretty aggressive with it. And now you got the drive functions on a lot of the Softube stuff. You also have the drive character function. So it just really plays around with which frequencies you're playing with. The further clockwise you get, the more top end you're playing with. Further counterclockwise, you end up with playing with more low end. I ended up doing, just past 12 o'clock, just past 0 here. All right, next up on this, we ended up with the gate. And let me just crank that down to 0. Don't crank it all the way. That is a bad idea. And we'll just turn on this gate here. 15.3. All right, so let's bring it in. Now, the trick is just to be letting the kick drum get through, obviously. So you don't want it so much. All right, now let's play with the punch. Turn that off. I'll show you what we're dealing with. A little bit of sustain. Now with this EQ, just a really, really simple EQ. I wanted to boost the low end and sort of just drop those low mids a little bit. Not a little bit, a lot of it. Just try and clear up some space right above that fundamental. With EQs like this where you can't really select the bands, I know the kick fundamental is about 74 hertz. I'm just looking at it earlier. I'll show you how to do that on the equalizers. I can't select 74 hertz on this little knob here. So what I'll do a lot is I'll do a shelf, and I'll do a shelf above. Let's zero that out. I'll do a shelf above the fundamental. So I know that fundamental is getting boosted. And then what I'll do is I will bring in a high pass to just below the fundamental to get rid of the stuff underneath it. Now I'm doing that on the other EQ. So that's just boosting the low end. I'm going to drop just to clear out some of that mud there, and then just to leave the rest of it for my main EQ. So that's all we're doing here on this American Class A. Now this equalizer's here. This is where most of the heavy lifting's happening. And let me show you what's up. I've got a dynamic band right here, which is not functioning because I had this not functioning because of a bypass, because I'm a silly person. All right, so we turn this American Class A back up to 5.5, where I had it, and now we're just firing up this Softube Equalizers. I'm still getting used to this. I'm a very simple person when it comes to plugins. I typically like having single elements. So the American Class A channel strip is something I'm sort of really getting used to. But typically, like if I throw up an EQ, I want an EQ. I don't mix and match my dynamic bands so much. I'll do EQ first, and then later I'll go through with another plugin and just do my dynamics so that I know, hey, I want to play with just my dynamic functions. I know which plugin to go to rather than just trying to sort through bands. Now that being said, this is insanely versatile EQ so far. I've been enjoying it. And let me show you sort of where we ended up with this kick. So most of what you're hearing is just me carving out a lot of this low mid section, doing a little dynamics function up here. Not a ton. It was more or less an experiment. I ended up keeping it just to sort of tame some of the attack on that kick. But we will start from scratch here and have some fun. All right, so I'm going to bring this over, going over to the B section. All right. So the first thing I'll do with any drum is I'll find my fundamental. So if you double click on here, it'll create a band for you. You can add a crap ton of bands on this EQ, which is great. I actually wish they had a list that you could pop down and actually edit your bands and see them like you could a Q10, or you can see on a Q10. There's so much clicking around here. Sometimes it's a little, you can make it very messy to navigate. Anyway, so what you can do on here is solo the band, and then sort of float through. You sort of hear that fundamental kick in. You just hear it's like very much stronger of a sound, 73. So put that 74. Leave that alone for now. Now, one of the reasons I like doing this is I like a visual representation of where my fundamental is, because I'll be throwing curves on here, and it'll be nice to actually see if I'm doing any big cuts around the fundamental, and I'll sometimes play with the bandwidth on my EQ. Anyway, after that, I'm going to put a pretty aggressive high pass on here and sort of bring it up right till it starts affecting your fundamental. I won't, like, I'm not one of those people just to completely cut it off right there. I mean, it's fun to have something below there. You can probably bring it up a bit more. But, you know, you're going to just end up really cutting too much out at some point. So I'm just going to back that off. Now I'm going to start playing with frequencies that are getting in the way. So we'll take a listen. So for the most part, we're just hearing a lot of stuff in these low mids and just a lot of noise, basically a little bit of crunchiness that's going on up here. A lot of mids and low mids getting in the way right here. You can actually see some of these spikes. You see a spike here, about 1K. You see the snare drum pop in still at about 330. See a spike here, 170. We'll start with this 170. What we'll do is we'll do a pretty hefty cut, and then we'll a little higher than that, actually. See a cut here. I think I'm going to do a bigger cut, about 270, actually pretty wide. Not about right there. Try that. What we'll do, delete that, bring this down a bit more. Do pretty wide, wind that out. Maybe move it over. Yeah, I don't like that. All right, so we'll bring that back. Narrow that back up. That sounds better. All right, what's happening is I'm getting rid of a little too much of my fundamental here. Drag this down a bit more. Let me do another. Do that cut about 1K. Ah. I'm going to narrow that a little more. Narrow this a little more. I feel like I'm taking too much of my fundamental here. That feels better. All right. I'm going to play with the dynamics band here, and what I'll do is start sort of right at the 0 point roughly. Turn my dynamics on, then drop my gain. Maybe we'll just max it out at -6. This is similar to an F6 where your gain, when you turn it dynamic mode, actually becomes the maximum range that it's going to drop down. And you start playing with your attack and release settings over here. So we're actually I'm going to speed up the attack. We're also going to do just a slight cut that is static. All right, let's start. Let's see how close we ended up with our original, shall we? So what I ended up doing is just narrow that down quite a bit. All right, let's go back. Geez, how big of a boost did I do? 7 dB. All right, that's pretty good right there. We'll keep it on that second one. I'm actually going to drop that low end. I feel like it's a bit too much. I'm going to take this 1K and drop there. I'm going to drop this a little more. Another one. Why not? Really, really easy to go overboard with these. I don't like it. All right. So that's a start there. Now I'm going to show you what's up with this this sample. So obviously I'm not using a compressor on here. We do end up mixing in a sample. That's how that turned out. What I ended up doing is sort of keeping this this F6 and the American Class A in there. Reason being, I wanted that gate before it hit the trigger because that snare was just nuts. But let me show you how I did that real quick, and then we'll move on. So I'm going to hide this just in case I ruin it. All right. So you take your kick in Pro Tools, highlight the channel over here, right click, duplicate. Now normally I would not have the automation or the inserts on here. Actually, I have the automation. I wouldn't have the inserts. But since I am keeping those first two plugins, I'm going to have that on here. Everything else stays the same. Hit OK. Bam. Your kick shows up. It'll have the same group assignments, which I have assigned to the kick. And what I will do is just clear that. Then I'm just going to add Drumagog. There are newer sampling programs out there. Haven't moved on yet. I know. Terrible person. All right, now the Wendell, I have kick 0. Now I'll go into these settings here, dynamics tracking. I'm just going to crank this down somewhere between 50 and 60. It's just very, very samply. I'm not being very, very elaborate here. This is just a sort of ride underneath the main kick. So let's solo this now. Now I'm just trying to get those, so it's not hitting those ghost notes very much. All right. Let's see how that goes with the recorded kick drum. Great. Now I'm going to bring down this. Basically trying to get this output a little cleaner. I'm also going to drop the output here. Maybe to -3. Give myself some more headroom. Let's ride this underneath the recorded kick. All right, and the last thing I did on this kick track, let me in with some overheads in a minute, but is this boom channel, which I'm just gonna sort of reactivate the plugins and fade in. Okay, it's already active. So what this is doing is just adding some distortion, some saturation to this plugin. All it really is black box. Just pretty heavy stuff going on there, and some VCA compression. Pretty aggressive because that is sort of the point of it. Let's show that real quick. So I have this in the boom track right here. I have it following the fader. We are going to turn that into pre-fade right now so we can just listen to the boom. All right, now let's just I'm going to move these over because I don't want to get rid of them. One thing, actually we'll do them as they're supposed to be done. So we'll turn these back off. The reason being is that as soon as you turn these pre's off, the way it's hitting this is going to change. So I'd rather just do it as it's going to be mixed. So let's just put these back in, and we'll take a listen. All right. So we're going to go to harmonic, black box. Just turn this up. And crank this up. That's beefy. A little loud. All right, do a little bit of air. It makes top end a little crispier. Watch what happens if I do this. Doing a lot to that snare in there, but not much to the kick, because the kick's a lot of low end. The snare is also going to feed through here, so we'll do that a little bit more when we get to our snare section. And then I'm going to throw in the VCA compressor here. All right, I didn't even look what ratio that was. Was that 3 or 4 to 1? 4 to 1. All right, we'll keep it at 4 to 1. And we're just going to dial in a little bit of drive here as well. Now, thing about drums in general, you typically really want to play with your attack. There we go. And if you're doing like standard compression on a drum, if you have attack pretty high, typically like 2-3 milliseconds, it'll pull it down while you still want the hit of that stick to be on there. So I'll typically throw down a drum attack till about 10 milliseconds. Basically play with that setting and take a listen. You can really suck the life out of your drums really, really quick if your attack's too fast. Let me slow this down. So there's no attack on here. It's really fast. You just hear it pull down. This is with the other kick mixed in there. So I'm gonna, since we are really trying to have some fun here, I'm gonna bring this up till it was about 7. So you hear it like suck down on that and play with some distortion. There we go. And we'll keep that on. That may adjust when I get to the snare in there. But all right, so here's that down. We're going to bring it in a little bit. So it's going to follow fader at this point, so I'm just going to leave it alone. And let's bring in the kick drum with our overheads real quick and our room. A little less, actually. Yeah, a little better. Turn this on. Because obviously you're not mixing in vacuum. Once you get your kick where you want it, you're going to start bring in your other instruments, in this case, the overheads in the room, are the next thing. Typically, I'll start making changes to the kick drum, the snare, and the things once I get that overhead in the mix. But anyway, we'll move on to the snare next. I hope you guys saw something you liked, and I hope to see y'all soon. Thank you very much.